Right. This is a video about SOLIDWORKS Visualize Professional. Um, just going to be a quick video overview, not anything in detail, but for ME 1700, especially project, your second project. Um, in the assignment write-up has some um, uh, suggestions for making a rendering so that you can market it to your client or whoever you're going to market it to make it show it off and make it look better than you can just using the SolidWorks built-in color features. It's really not SolidWorks is not really meant to do any kind of rendering, so SolidWorks Visualize opening that up, and then um, what I'm going to do. For those of you that have a Mac, if you see a really small window when you first open it, go to View or Show Viewport Settings, and then do Fill Window, and then say OK. And then you should just see some empty environment here. For your products, I'm going to bring in assembly. You might bring in parts. It really depends on what you want to show off. If you don't see SOLIDWORKS options open up here, assembly, just select which type. There's lots of other things you can bring in, but for me, I'm just going to use SOLIDWORKS assembly. And this same assembly I used to show a vise is what I'm going to bring in. Again, this could be Mac only. It might also be for laptops that don't have a dedicated graphics card. So if you see this, it's okay. It's not going to affect really your functionality. It might be a little bit slower, but that's okay. All right, so when you import, brings up this little option box, import settings. I played around with these various settings, and from what I found, the default options are good. So just say okay, and then give it a little bit, and it'll come in. Now, here's where things hopefully will be like, that doesn't really look like it looked in SolidWorks even. It looks worse, in my opinion. What I mean by worse, um, kind of a lot of the things are kind of washed out. So especially if you turn the part, you see how like this blue top has now kind of looks like white, and the white parts are really white, and on the green part it looks not white at all here, even down here. So like the light is potentially too bright. We could mess around with that. But before we do that, I want to go in and look at uh, what we actually brought in. So we brought in the whole assembly. So you can select different parts and do separate things with those, or for most of the time, you're just going to be applying um, the different things you're going to do to the overall assembly. One thing you will notice is that as far as individual parts, each one of the colors that was assigned, I assigned a color and I think also material properties, and those come over when you import it. So that's why I'll just select one of these and show you. So uh, the material property, plastic, and the actual green color. Even in here, you could mess around with the roughness. You could try and see if you can make it transparent. Sure enough, it kind of looks a little bit, not really, doesn't really look all that. It is transparent, it just looks darker though. So these basic colors, um, they don't have any texture maps to them. They're gonna act differently than when you have an actual material applied to them, and I'll kind of show you what I mean by that. So, how do we get more uh, appearances? So for me, and for the purpose of this class, um, with the base install, I didn't choose any extra options. When I go to, I'll do that again, add import appearance. Might be different on Windows, but it'll probably be in a similar path. So for me, it was in Documents, SOLIDWORKS Visualize Content Appearances, and you can see that there's different types of categories, if you will. So fabric, metal, rubber, plastic, wood maybe. Probably going to be materials, appearances. I'm kind of mixing those two terms um, that you're going to work with. So let's just pick, I don't know, a vise probably is made out of steel. And here I'm just going to bring in, I don't really know how each one of these looks. So I just select one, shift, and then open them all. And then they'll populate here. All right. So let's select this part, and then I just drag it over, drop it on one of the parts. And then if you look at the other properties, it's still just a basic material. So let's try another one. So I don't know what the heck that material is, but if I look at the normal, it got a chain link steel. So that's kind of interesting. And then if you go over to this texture, some of these appearances have textures in them. And what that basically means is it has this image that applies to the actual part. So think of just a 2D image being applied to this 3D surface. Um, how it's applied, I'm not going to go into all the detail, but how it's projected on the geometry, you can control that. You can like change how fine and how loose, big the chain links are. You could play around with obviously the brightness. You could disable the texture, and you could see it actually still has some of that material properties to it. But I'm gonna go and enable the texture. If I invert it, um, for some reason it looked like it had the chain link on the outside. That's why you kind of saw it was basically see-through. So now we have this chain link on, kind of looks like on the outside of the part, if you will. So that looks kind of cool. I'm not really going into details about like how to make your part look the way you want it to look. I'm just showing you different options here. So don't take any of this as like, oh, I need to make it look like what Alex just did. No, I'm just obviously choose what's appropriate for whatever your parts. It might be simple silver color, um, or this galvanized steel, plate. Um, Whatever makes sense to you guys as far as what your product actually is. I'm just showing you, for the sake of time, these different things. Um, you might, I'm going to go back to one of these others. This chain link one was interesting. Okay, do you see how it's reflecting that yellow off onto this? So with anything that has that kind of texture, you'll see that that's possible to have that. And if that's not what you want, you have to play around with it. You will find that there's always, not always, typically a seam because that image is wrapped around your object. So um, I I can't remember. I think there's a way you can rotate that around. I think when you rotate this, it just rotates the actual texture that's applied. Um, I'm not actually sure how you could shift that. There might be a way, but I would just choose a different angle to then get your image from. Other thing that might be confusing to you at first, you might think that you could be able to select that and move it like you did in the assembly. Um, it's possible that you can do that in here. I would imagine so, since you can do animation and stuff like that. But for the purpose of this project and your submission, what I would recommend is just get it saved in the sort of orientation that you're wanting to, take pictures from, get a rendered image from. Um, so, example, I could have in the assembly in SolidWorks, rotated this up a little bit so it was easier to see like the hand wheel and stuff like that. But for the purpose of this video, I just brought this in as is. Okay, so again, I want to bring in some other materials. Um, I'm just trying random stuff here. So just to show you how I can make things look very different very quickly. Um, Same thing, you can apply UV. This depth, actually, I'm not 100% sure what that does. A lot of these things you'll find the same thing. The rotation obviously changes the rotation of the texture, the image applied to it. Yeah, I'm actually not 100% sure what that depth is. That's interesting. Um, so there's the actual material with the image, and then there's also a normal image. I'm not going to go into those just for the sake of time, but you can play around with how those affect it. Okay, um, so here again, you could play around with the roughness. Typically, that will make it like more of a matte finish. So like if I select this part and change the roughness and then deselect, you see how it has more of a not so shiny. The translucency you could play with, cut out opacity, basically kind of similar to transparency. Um, if it's completely opaque, it's 0% transparent. So, okay. So I could go on and on. I could find other, let's just grab some more materials, organic, sky, like clouds. Again, I'm just goofing around playing with this, but kind of shows you how you can really, how these textured items are much different than the colors. Bring a couple more. Might have some rubber parts, so let's look at textured rubber part. Maybe I know how to make that wheel. Huh. Looks like the wheel. Let's see if I can get, yep, both. Looks like there's a, I'm not sure why, maybe the cosmetic thread. I applied that material color to both this extrusion and this top. And you can see how that's kind of a nice textured rubber feel, look and feel. What else? Definitely probably has, I would imagine, plastics. Um, Underneath plastics are actually composites. So carbon fiber, you might be like, shouldn't that be a different location? Um, Carbon fiber is actually mostly epoxy, so that's why it's under a plastic. Carbon reinforced fiber plastic, CRFP. Um, so I don't know, let's make that. And there's definitely where I want to mess around with the UV, make it look more realistic. That's more realistic. All right. So again, I think you get the idea here. It's kind of a weird looking part, but if you chose the right materials and messed around with those settings, then it would look a lot more realistic. So we got the model tab there, the appearance tab, then we also have this environment tab, which is a whole nother thing. So the environment will affect, the environment has this, it's actually an image brought in, if I understand it correctly. The 3-point faded is what is the default for SolidWorks. So just like the appearances, we can select a different environment and get different lighting. Here again, with just like with the appearances, we can import different environments. So I'm going to bring in this Classic Studio. Now you can see the light is even more just different. And to me, it just kind of looks better. Again, this is all just personal opinion, what looks right, what looks good, what doesn't. If I go back to that, it's really bright and washed out. Could easily, mess with the brightness here again, and just tone it down a little bit, and play with that, and just till I get it to where it looks like the way I want it The back plate, if I double click that one, and then it goes to green check, that's what's actually your back plate, or you can think of it like the background image here. Um, for most part, I'm using just default, you know, appearances, etc., environments. But I did for this one, I thought it'd be interesting to put a vise on a bench, like a workbench. So I'm going to import, oh, sorry, go to backplates and then say new backplate. And I'm going to open up this JPEG. So it's going to seem kind of weird to you, but the background image, um, again, you could probably figure out a way to resize it. You could also crop it and change its size, but it's going to apply to all of the background. So if you want to then put your part or your assembly onto the actual device that, or sorry, workbench that's in your scene, you then have to just sort of move the part around till it kind of looks like it's in that environment. I thought maybe that's something you guys would want to do, kind of put your part within, and you know, with a background that kind of looks like where it would be in real life. I don't know, just one option. Um, if you Control Z, it will undo like previous movements all the way up to removing that back plate. All right, the three different lights, sorry, directional lights. Right now, it gives us pretty good coverage of all of them, so we could delete, add lights, put them in different positions. I'll let you play around with it. Typically, what I found is that the environment's lights have a bigger effect than individual lights, but again, that's something you can play around with. So you can go to the transform and change where they actually are. And then this last piece, second to last piece, cameras. Cameras, right now, we have this viewport. So that's just saying, okay, where am I going to, based on where I move my part, the camera is at some default location that's coming over from SolidWorks' viewport. If we go to this camera, you can physically see the camera, a representation of that camera, and then that's going to then, when you do the rendering, it's going to take it from the camera position up here. So here's where you'd want to then transform that so that instead of it looking kind of like in this preview, maybe you want to bring that closer, etc., etc. So for me, this is probably going to be the easiest way for you guys to just, rotate it around, kind of get it such that it kind of looks nice, and then create a picture off of that. Up here, if you want to take videos, I'm going to leave that up to you. I'm not going to go through that. You can put a turntable on this and then start it, and then it kind of turns it. You could do that, and then I think there's a way to save video. But for me, I can just kind of like to position it there. What you will notice is, again, like I said before, I can't really move those parts. You can move them if you go to this object manipulation tab. I don't really know why or when or why you would do that. And actually, I did even move the part. Interesting. It looks like it's just moving the texture. That's kind of funny. So maybe that actually is the way to move the texture. Yeah, not really. I think what has to happen is you actually have to select the actual part itself, the head, and then go move. And then it'll actually move it out of place. But that will, as you can see, it'll kind of break or undo the mates that you have in the assembly. It's completely separate. They're not backward, they're not coupled because this is a different software program. So I'm going to undo that. I think it takes a while to, when you undo a transform like that, it might take a while to figure out how to go back to its original place. So I'm just going to give it a second here. So again, yeah, there it goes. So um, that tool's there. I would suggest doing an exploded type view, save that assembly in that orientation or setup, and then bringing that in if you want to then create a render with an exploded view. You can do it in here, like I showed you just a second ago. You move parts around and explode them, so to speak, but it's not as well controlled as you have with SolidWorks itself. Um, yeah. All right. So, last but not least, if for some reason you can't find your files and stuff, there's this library tab. Um, so you can look in cloud and look for different appearances in different categories there. But like I said, the local ones seem to work very well for me. And then when you're done with that, okay, um, you could go to like preset positions. So you could look at the right plane, front. I it's really up to you. This is not really helpful from my viewpoint. Um, I like, kind of gives you an idea of what it's doing. It's basically creating that environment, that sphere that's around it. Okay, let me zoom in here. Looks like there's a little bit of reflection off this, whatever it's sitting on. You guys can play around with that. And then just get into position. And then for this class, just go to render wizard image. I'm just going to do a draft. I would suggest, before you figure out how this all works, until you finally create that really high quality image, just go with draft instead of all these 4K because they're going to take longer to render. So next, typically I would go with a PNG because you have this. If you have any sort of transparency, the alpha will come in there. JPEG might, but not guaranteed. Um, Size of your image is going to be this. By that, 96 print resolution is pretty low. If you go back the 4K or whatever other presets, it'll have a much bigger image and much higher resolution. All right. And then I didn't go over it, but you can create different configurations. So you can have like multiple uh, positions and colors and layouts. And then these render layers I didn't mess with, so I'm just assuming I have that one. And then specify, give it your project name, so that you can go and find, find the part or find the actual image that you created. Visualize, I don't know. And then here's where you're supposed to take a second and then specify where you want to go to. So I'm going to save it to my user's desktop. And then there's two options. There's a queue, but things typically render pretty quickly. So you hit queue and you're probably not going to see that actually finished. So just hit render. And there you saw it just for a second there. I was working on it. It's really pretty fast. We're also not doing too much fancy stuff. Minimize that. And then go to my desktop. Not that one. Ignore that error. All right. There we go. Where'd it go? Oh, here we go. So I'm going to go to Visualize, and it's an image. Open up that image, and there's my rendering. So not too fancy, pretty simple, goofy colors, but gives you an idea how flexible and how easy it is to do this rendering. So take your time. I'm going to call that good. If you want to do this, put those in your project write up. That'd be great. All right.